My name's Eugene Pizzolato. Today I want to tell my story around emotional neglect, not having my development needs met, and the trauma I experienced which caused me to survive my childhood. My story started 3 months before my 4th birthday after a tragic event where my baby sister died at 2.5 months old. At the time I was told that my sister died tragically. Back in that day, it was common for women in the 60s to prop up a bottle with a pillow and walk out of the room to feed their child, apparently. And what I was told then was that my mum had done this. We'd lived 45 minutes out in the country, and my baby sister, Anna Maria, choked on the milk. After that day, my life changed. My mum was then locked up in a mental institution. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. My father grabbed me by the hand to lead me away from the hospital. As I looked back at my mum, I could feel her fear, her anxiety, like something was not right. And as a 4-year-old, I knew something was terribly wrong with that moment, which I found many, many years later. The tragic story for me was after my mum came home, the responsibility for her emotional well-being rested on me, and I became her carer. I think there might be a term, surrogate. There was nothing sexual about my relationship with her. It was all purely to be there to support her when she was scared or fearful, or if my dad had to work, I got the job to stay home with her. And that started a journey of that was my childhood. I could recall horrific times where, that was at 4, at 5. I could remember my parents were evicted from their home because my father and my mother by this point were alcoholics, and we came home this day from wherever we were. We must have gone into town shopping, and all our furniture was outside of our home, so someone had come and removed our furniture. And my father, because I was the smallest, put me through this little gap in the window, and I went in and unlocked the house. And while we were trying to get ourselves back in the house, 3 men turned up. And I can remember my dad going outside to confront these men, and then my mum followed. And obviously, I didn't know what to do. I just followed as well. And my father was no match for these men, and they beat him pretty badly. And my mum had a knife in the front of her dress. I don't know how she put it in there, and then pulled it out to attack the men. And one of the men punched my mum and knocked her out cold. And I don't know what was it about me, but even then I thought I had to step in and do something. And there was this axe on a chopping block, and so I went and grabbed the axe, and I'm struggling to release the axe, and then I actually go and confront the men. Like, I felt like I needed to protect my mum, and the men were really quite good. The man put his hand on my head and said, "Our fight's not with you, son. Leave it alone." And not like I could have done anything. And then we were evicted, and we ended up staying at a property up the road. My only good memory I could remember of my childhood was in those 2 weeks we went to stay. I can only remember one day. But sadly, when we got to go back, and I slept in this amazing room where I could still smell the mothballs. It was like this haven that felt safe, which I'd never experienced before. But when we were evicted, we went back to that property. This time something changed. We weren't welcome back in the house, and we got to sleep in the dairy on the floor of this dirty, stinking dairy. And I think that had to do with more, not me and my brother, but more to do with the fear of my dad. I'm not sure, because that was really confusing to me. How can they be so loving 6 months before, and then we're sleeping in this horrible place? Then we found a property not far out of Myrtleford in country Victoria called Rosewhite. And I'm now about 6 years old, and my mum, after being locked up in the mental institution, which I ended up finding out was my father orchestrated that, my mum started losing her mind and started hearing voices. I think she broke. Her psyche couldn't handle the distress of everything that was going on. And the voices started telling her, she was a very religious woman, my mum, and I idealised, I love my mum more than anything. And I always felt this in my heart too, what can I do to support her in any way I can? Even at a very young age, I had that in me to do that. But the voices started telling her that the world was going to end through flood. Now, imagine, I'm a 6-year-old, I couldn't swim, and I could see how terrified my mum was, and I still felt I needed to be there for her without showing her my fear. And like the trauma that caused me was, I think it's still in my nervous system, the fear of, waiting for this day to come where you're going to flood. And at night time when I'd go to bed, I'd put boxes around my bed hoping that would stop the water when it came. And the water never came. And, the day would come and nothing would happen. And I could see the disappointment in mum's, or confusion in my mum's eyes, as into, why did that not happen? And then the cycle would start again, and there'd be another date. And this went on for months, and no one stopped and talked to me. Like I navigated. Today my mind boggles how no one came to say, is this little boy okay? Walking on eggshells is probably an understatement to say how I felt in that time. And in the first 13 years of my life, we moved 13 times through my father's fear of being in one place too long. And my dad became very jealous, very protective, and isolated my mum. And so I could never really get settled. I can remember he was always drunk. Like I can recall my dad being drunk 99% of the time, and he was an angry, violent, very angry, hurt man. In the 1% when I saw him was the only time I saw peace, or saw the possibility of a good man. And so that really was my life. I stayed home. I think I missed over 50% of my schooling. So going to school was really difficult. You'd be there one day, you'd learn, and then you miss 3 days, and then you turn up. And initially, the children were beautiful and supportive. But over time, the children knew, well, this kid's never here. We don't want to be stuck with him, because it was too hard. It was too hard for me. I can't imagine how difficult it was. How could another child help me when I was so far behind? So that pressure and that feeling of the unknown was so overwhelming for me as a child that, if the incidents now in my life of unknown, my CPTC gets activated. I mean, I now have all the tools to navigate that, but it's extreme. It was extreme. And as time went on, I can remember where my mum was locked up in mental institutions by the time I'm 10, 6 times in Mayday Hills Mental Institution in Beechworth. And on this 6th time, when I think I'm around 10, because I got the records from the hospital through the Freedom of Information Act, they found the interpreter didn't turn up. And so they asked me if I could interpret for my mum. Now, today they would be jailed for that. Mental institutions were horrific at best, and their understanding of depression or women's needs or emotional needs or support was way, way beyond what it is today. So they sit me down and they ask them, because my mum couldn't speak English. We come from an Italian background. They sit down and the first question was, can you ask, is there, how's her health, and is anything, how's she feeling? Anything we can do for her? Just basic questions, which I translated. And then they asked this question, said, is there anything your mother would like us to know? So I asked my mum, turned to my mum and said, hey mum, I'd like to know, is there anything you'd like to share with them? And she said, yes, there is. So can you please ask them to tell my husband to stop raping me? I witnessed that happening in my home. There was no consideration for me as a child. There's no consideration for my mother. Because they labelled her schizophrenic, her voice didn't matter anymore. So I go home and I'm so messed up in my mind thinking, how can that be okay? And so my view of the world became so distorted because I knew it was true. It messed with me. Maybe 11 a year later that there was a school excursion. It's like I felt there in a moment that, wow, maybe I can have an experience with these children, to just be a child. And I can recall coming home and asking my mum, I said, hey mum, look, there's this excursion, all the children are going, can I go? And she said, no, you can't go, I'm too scared you'll hurt yourself. So I stopped there and thought, okay, ask my dad when he gets home, ask my dad, it's going to be okay. And so my dad comes home and said, hey dad, there's this excursion happening at school, all the kids are going, can I go? And he said, does it cost money? I said, yeah, it does. And he said, you can't go. My dad didn't care about experiences. I could have had an opportunity to make friendships or just to experience something outside the home. But then going back to school, being this boy who hardly ever went to school, was so behind in his work, and then all the children talking about this experience they had, I've never felt like I never belonged more than in that moment. It was just horrible. It felt like I was always on the outside looking in. I could say in all of my childhood, I never went to one party, one excursion, another person's house. So the social experience was something I really craved, but then became fearful of because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be, I didn't know how to play. And I always had this, my brother and I have spoken about, he said, he calls me Huey, he said, you always wanted to help Mum. It's like part of you was proud to take that role. And I believe that. And I always had this view to look after the person who couldn't look after themselves. Because in grade 6, so this is a year after, there was a new boy come to school, and one of the school bullies come up to me and said, go and talk to that child and organise to meet for a fight. Like, he had to prove who was the alpha in the school. I was so angry in that moment. I was so angry, thinking, what did this boy do to you? Like, really? So what I did is we met at the end of the oval, and about 30, 40 kids gathered around, and I turned up to this boy and he said, well, where is he? I said, well, I never told him. I said, what do you mean you didn't tell him? I said, well, I really don't like what you're doing, and if you think you're that good, why don't you fight me? Now, I never had a fight in my life. Like, I wouldn't have a clue how to defend myself. And so we're fighting away, and he said we had to save face, right? So get into the fight, and nothing was really happening. And I called him, and back then, I said he fought like a girl, which is not appropriate to say today, but I said, what are you doing? Like, you're meant to be this hero. And when you've made a mistake, and then he beat the crap out of me, like he pulverized. He came over to me and said, mate, that's really amazing. You're such a legend. And he said, wanted to be my friend. And I said, why would I want to be a friend with you? Like, why would I want to be a friend with someone who hurts people? Like, I think about and reflect on that moment where I could have got in with these kids, and I actually stood up and said, no. I always had this instinct to protect or to look after or to support. By the time I'm 12, 13, we moved out to Barwidgee Creek in Myrtleford, and the property, we always rented property. I mean, the property was had holes in the roof, we had to have buckets to catch. My dad was never interested in environments as long as he could have money for alcohol. But we were on a tobacco farm, and the people who ran the property were these two amazing men who saw myself and my brother, and so they came over and said, hey, look, would you like to work on the farm? We said, wow. I said, we'd love to. And so we started working the tobacco. They said, how would you like to be paid? Now or at the end of the season? I had no relationship to money. I said, well, how about we do it at the end of the season? So we worked the whole season. So, it was an escape. It was nice to be part of something. I got paid $1,176 for the season. I felt so proud. And then my dad came along and said, give me the money. I need it. Gave us, allowed us to have maybe $150 to go and buy. I think I bought a bike and some new clothes, and made me feel like how lucky I was that he gave me that money. And then he fixed his car and drank the rest of the money. And I couldn't understand, thinking, well, okay, well, that's what you got to do. And then my dad got an idea and thought, my boys now understand the tobacco industry. I'll use them to go to farmers, because there's a team of 6. Need a team of 6 tobacco workers to pick. So for the next 3 years, so when I'm 13, 14, 15, my father negotiated top rates, like 50 cents above the normal going rate, because he had half a team, to get us to work, and then he kept all the money. When I was 16, I said to my brother, look, mate, we need some money. So my dad will give us $5 and he'll keep the 80, 90 that we made for the weekend. So I said, why don't we reverse that? So we'll give you $5 for petrol and we'll keep the money. And so I mustered the courage to say that to my dad, and we never worked again. And my relationship to money started. So after that, I hated money. Really had this unhealthy relationship with money, which ended up affecting me later on. We moved then to Albury Wodonga, and I always wanted to be a pilot. There was an opportunity to go and do my work experience at the airport, and I go to the airport, and the gentleman who was running the workshop lost his son 2 years earlier. Being a respectful young Italian man, I respected my elders. He took a liking to me and he offered me an apprenticeship. So he actually said, come back at halfway through the year, and if the report is good, I'll give you an apprenticeship. My report was horrific, and he still gave me the apprenticeship, and I felt so grateful. It was overwhelming, and it's probably the first good thing that happened in my life. And I was coming home with a sense of achievement. I thought, wow, this is amazing for me. And I was like, as I come home, I can hear my mum and dad arguing. And as I come around the back of the house, I see my father push my mum off a set of stairs, and she falls on her back on the concrete path behind her. And the only reason she didn't smash her head is because she had her hair in a ponytail. So I raced over to see that my mum was okay. And the rage that came up in me in that moment, like I felt like just for one day, can I just be happy, just one day? And I felt in that moment, can't explain it, that I have to do something to stop my dad. So I got up, grabbed my dad, threw him up against the wall, said, that's the last time you are ever touching my mum. Like, it's not going to happen anymore. Then I walked back into the house, back in the yard, and the shame I felt for touching my dad. Like I then, I felt I shouldn't have touched my dad, he should have touched my mum. Felt so bad about my life, thinking, why can't it be better? And then I hear my dad come out of the house with this huge knife. And I looked at him and thought, I believed with every part of my being that my father would not hurt me. You love me, you won't hurt me. So I just stood there looking at him. And that was the last day I've ever had that certainty. Then moments later, he stabbed me in the heart and I swerved and he just scraped the side of my chest and I fell to the ground and nothing worked. Like my body just felt like it was concrete, like it was, fear is the understatement. And he kept it attempting to strike me while I'm on the ground. And because he was drunk, I was able to evade and I got away. And I ran to the police station, told them what had happened. And they said, look, we've got to file this long on your father. And if you charge him with attempted murder, we guarantee you 8 to 10 years jail. And I said, what do you mean you've got to file on this long? They said, we've had that many complaints from neighbours from all the violence. They grabbed my dad and handcuffed him to the bed. And I couldn't make a decision without my mum. My whole life I've been her support. So I went to mum and said, Mum, this is our chance. This is our chance to be free of dad. And she looked at me and said, you will not be charging dad with attempted murder. I felt in that moment like my soul left my body. Like I felt like the worthlessness of worthlessness. Like it was the worst feeling I can imagine, that, not only that my father tried to kill me, then the woman who I sacrificed my childhood for threw me under the bus. So part of me died that day, which I ended up discovering many, many years later what that was. And police didn't come back to check on me. Police said, we can't do anything because you're not charging him. And so again, nothing was said. I had to internalise everything. The next day was like nothing happened. So then I drifted my way through life, and then my 18th birthday, and the day someone said to me, everything will be okay, Eugene, once you turn 18, you'll be an adult. Everything will be okay. But nothing happened. Nothing changed. And I was so disappointed. I don't know what I was expecting. I thought, I don't know, some wisdom or love or kindness or healing. I don't know what. So all I had was, probably learnt this through the TV, work hard, get a job, build a career, get married, have kids. And so that's where I started. I met a woman at 20. It didn't take much for me to, all you had to say hello and I went, oh my God. Married at 20, divorced at 25, 3 children. I was very good at working. I had 3 jobs. I was very good to be a provider. I had no emotional substance. I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know how to be present. That part of me just didn't exist. I kept seeing my children every fortnight. Probably the hardest part about the divorce was not seeing my children. At 32, I was running an $80 million business, a team of 255 people. And on this one day, I just physically could not get out of bed. I was so burnt out, couldn't move, couldn't talk. 2 days came and went, and not one person called me. And that was the first part to me starting inner child work. As time unfolded, I kept working on myself. I just kept working on myself and working on myself and working on myself. And probably up till then, I'd done something like 2,500 hours of therapy and personal development work. I finally had the courage to go into the mental health system. I actually said to myself, what is it that I need so I can deal with this? And I created my own healing modality. I found my inner peace. I felt self-respect, confidence. I feel in control. I'm rebuilding my relationship with my children. I've got 2 that live with me full time, reconnected with the 3rd. That's an ongoing process which I'll commit my life to, but it's the best I've ever felt. I feel complete as a human being and I feel very comfortable, and I feel so empowered when I'm supporting people through their own journey with my own program. So that's where I'm at now.